This is lesson 2.5 journal. We are going to be modeling fraction division today. So to your I will statement today, I will be able to correctly divide fractions by modeling. So when you model fraction division, we're going to be using rectangles as our whole units. So some vocabulary for this lesson, which we've already written down, is our fraction numerator, which is the top of the fraction, denominator, which is the bottom number on the fraction, equivalent fractions, meaning they are equal to each other but different numerators and denominators, improper fraction, that's when the numerator is larger than the denominator, and a mixed number is when you have a whole number and a fraction together. So this one says, Erin lives 2/3 miles away from the school. Each block is 1/6 mile long. How many blocks is it to get to her school? Okay, let's think back to a lesson we had last chapter. I had you write down, oh, never mind, I haven't taught this lesson yet. We'll come back to that. So, Erin lives 2/3 mile away, so that's what we have. So what we need to do in our picture, this is going to be one whole unit, so we need to split it into 2/3. So if I split this into thirds, it means I need 3 equal sized pieces. Do the best you can to make them equal looking. Okay, and we need 2 of those thirds. You're going to need your highlighters, so we're going to highlight these in yellow. So there's 1/3 and 2/3. So you can see 2/3 there. So our equation would start with having 2/3. Now it says each block is 1/6 mile long. So here we have the total, which is 2/3. And then we have how big each group is. So this would be the size of a group. So each group is 1/6 of a mile. So what that means is we are looking for how many blocks it is to get to her school. So we're looking for the number of groups. Okay, that's what we're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to split our picture into 6. Okay, this is where your red pen's going to come in. If I want this to be split into 6, let's divide this up into 6 pieces. So if I divide my thirds into each into 2 pieces, so I'm just showing you, all I'm doing is making these sixths. So now there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces to make up the whole unit. We want to know how many 1/6 pieces we have. So I'm going to take my other color highlighter and I'm going to circle groups of 1/6. So here would be 1/6. Here's another group of 1/6. Here's a group of 1/6, and here's a group of 1/6. So my equation, we had 2/3, we're dividing it by into groups of 1/6, and we were able to make 1, 2, 3, 4 complete groups. This group's complete, all of these have 1/6 in it, so we were able to create 4 groups. So to answer the question, how many blocks is it for her to get to her school? It's 4 blocks. Next one, it says Charles has 2.5 bottles of paint. He needs to split it evenly among 6 people. What fraction of a bottle will each person get? So if we want 2.5, we got 2 whole units. Let's cut this one in half. And then we're going to shade 2.5 of them. So that means there's 1, 2, and half. So we have 2.5 to start with. So 2.5, and we're dividing it. Let's break this down a little bit. So our total is 2.5. Okay, what else do we know? We want it among 6 people, so that means there are going to be the number of groups. Is there 6? So I'm dividing it 6 ways. And now we'll model it and see what happens. So one thing that's always helpful, remember how I taught you that mixed numbers are only good for final answers? Let's make this improper. So 2 times 2 is 4 plus 5 is 1 is 5. So this is the same as 5 halves divided into 6 groups. So I'm going to divide these into halves. All we're doing is cutting them in half, and you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those shaded. So we have 5 halves. Now I need to divide it into 6 groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it into 6 groups from this direction. So I'm going to cut it in half. Alright, cut in 6. So now I can make 6 groups out of that. So I'm going to take and circle equal groups. I divided it into 6 pieces. So here's one group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups, 5 groups, and 6 groups. So we have 6 equal groups. So we took 2 1/2 or 5 halves, divided it 6 ways, and now we're going to see what is in each group. So in each group that I've circled here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. I have 5 pieces, but how big is each piece? So each one of these pieces, it takes 12 of them to make the whole unit. So that means that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 twelfths. So each person gets 5 twelfths of a bottle of paint. 5 twelfths of a bottle. So what we found was the size of each group. That was what we didn't know. Alright, let's try this next one. This one doesn't have a story problem to go with it, but we still have a beginning. So we have 5/6. So we know the total. This one here tells me the size of the group. It's a fraction, so it's the size. So we're going to split this into 6 and shade 5 of them. So if I split it into 6, cut it in half here, cut those into thirds, and I'll end up with 6 pieces, and I'm going to shade 5. Shade 5. Okay, we got 5/6. Now, the size of my group is I want 1/3 of a unit in each group. Well, 1/3 is the same as 2/6, right? So if that's the same as 2/6, I'm using my equivalent fractions here. Since this is already cut into 6ths, I want 1/3 in each group. So to get your other highlighter, and we're going to circle every group of 1/3, which is 2/6. So here's a group of 1/3 of a unit. Here's a third of a unit. This one here is just a piece. Okay, now I want you to see this because this part for some reason is really hard for people to wrap their brains around. How many groups were we able to make? So that's what we were looking for, is how many groups we could make. So we were able to make 2 whole groups. So we made 2 groups of 1/3. Now this right here is left over. It takes 2 pieces to make a whole group, and I have 1 of them. So don't I have half of a third over here? So I was able to create 2 and 1/2 groups. 2 whole groups of 1/3 and half of another group. Okay, let's try over here. We have 1 and 2/5. So I'm going to shade in 1 hole, cut this into fifths. So we want to make 5 equal pieces, make them as equal as you can. I know it's not going to be perfect. And we're going to shade 1 hole, two fifths. Okay, there's my 1 and 2/5. That's the total amount I have. I want groups of 3/5. So that's the size of a group. So that means I'm looking for how many groups I can create. Now remember, mixed numbers are only good for final answers. So let's take and break this into fifths and see how many fifths we have and make it improper. So I'm going to cut this into fifths as well. Okay, so you can see that I've turned this into 7/5, which is the same amount. I've just cut this into pieces as well, so I have 5 here and 2 here, so that's where the 7/5 comes from. Now we're going to be dividing it into groups of 3/5. Now this one, since they're already in fifths, I can make groups of 3/5. So with your other color, you're going to make a group of 3/5. Circle it. There's one group of 3/5. There's another group of 3/5. So I'm able to make 2 whole groups, but I still have we are able to create 2 whole groups, but then we have 1 piece left over out of, takes 1, 2, 3 to make a group. So we have 1/3 of a group left over. Alright, last one that we'll do together here. Aria created a scarf that is 6 feet long. It is made up of stripes that are equal in length. Each stripes are in the scarf. Okay, so we're starting with 6 feet, so that would be 6 whole units. That's the total. We're dividing it up into stripes, and each stripe is 3/5 of a foot long. So that's the size of each stripe. So we have a total, and we have the size of a group. So we're trying to figure out how many stripes, how many groups there are. So how many stripes? Alright, so let's model here. So if I have 6 whole units, I'm going to shade all 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I got 6 whole units, but I need to split it into fifths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into an improper fraction. So this would be 6/1, but I need it cut into fifths. So I want an equivalent fraction here. So how many fifths would go into 60? Okay, that's where we times this by 5, and we times this by 5. That means we end up with 30. And we can divide it into groups of 3/5. So how would that look like in our picture? We're going to divide each of these into fifths. So cut each rectangle into 5 equal pieces. That one's cut into fifths. That one's cut into fifths. Same thing on the rest of these. Alright, so we've cut it into fifths, and our size of a group is 3/5. So now take your other color, and I want you to circle 3/5. So that right there would be one group. So in the story, that would mean that would be one stripe. 2, there's 3/5. Just keep circling as many groups of 3/5 as you can. Okay, this one worked completely. So in other words, there are no partial groups. Up here we had leftover pieces. That's why our answers had a fraction with them. This we were able to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 complete groups. So there would be 10 stripes on this scarf. So that's our number of groups, 10 complete stripes. Okay, rate yourself on this concept. Are you a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then take a picture and put it in on Google Classroom.